and of people in the world at large. Thank you for joining us once again. It's the second edition of your informative and knowledge sharing program, Global Insight, proposed to you by Globus and the Pan-African Media Television. Today we want to discuss the effects of disinformation in shaping global world order. In our interconnected world, disinformation is and continue to play a critical role in shaping perceptions in politics, economics, culture, religion, among other aspects, impacting the global order. This episode of Global Insight, however, examines disinformation, its elements and its influence on globalization, international relations, and public perception of key issues and its ramification in shaping world order. Though this information started in the 50s, according to report, it has taken another dimension in this digital era. A recent prime example is Donald Trump's US president use of an unfounded video claiming a white African genocide in South Africa, which to an extent highlighted the use of rhetorics by global leaders in their political discourse to turn falsehoods into perceived truths. Historical instances of disinformation, such as those during the Holocaust, the Rwandan Genocide, and the Arab Spring, among others, illustrate still the dangerous consequences of such narratives. So in today's landscape, with heightened information warfare, where citizens are increasingly aware of information dissemination complexities, disinformation threatens national sovereignty and, however, and also ideologies, especially amid renewed imperial interest across the globe. This calls for a greater awareness of how this information undermines the established of a Eurocentric world order. Disinformation also campaigns, probably disinformation campaigns have been successful in recent times. Disinformation campaigns work well due to cracks or lapses in our society. How then can government, civil society, other stakeholders actually prove reality from this information? And just to note that the rise of bodies like the BRICS nations and of course the championing of multipolarity actually brings in a new dogma that will indicate a shift towards a more responsible global society, that it's prompting us to investigate these ideologies that contribute to the prevalence of disinformation today. So with a panel of experts, we're going to have an in-depth analysis, understanding what disinformation is, trying of course to differentiate it from misinformation and other ideologies or terminologies which we find very prevalent in today's complex society, where international shifts in international relations have shown how major powers are trying probably to redefine their scopes, and of course what real definition can we give to this concept of disinformation, and how can we mitigate the negative effects of it on society and of course the global world order. Thank you so much. I'll go straight away to getting to unveil our panel, and I think we're going to go to Russia. Let's meet with Yulia Berg. She's a political scientist, also founder of Global Expert Club, and we are welcoming you to this edition of Global Insight. Of course, starting with the first question, answering what this information is all about and some of the contextual framework of the terminology and how it affects our world of today.
Hello. Well, first of all, I'm happy to join this program today, and happy to see the amazing panel of experts. So I'm sure it will be a very interesting and fruitful discussion, especially given the fact that the topic of today, disinformation, is very much up to date. We're living now not even in the era of post-truth, as it used to be called, but we live in the world of, let's say, shades of gray, when On the one hand, we have millions of pieces of content being produced every day. And at the same time, the core of that content and let's say the essence of it is not always clear in terms of the sources, in terms of the key points mentioned there, and so on. So on the one hand, we have the high tech and all the technology that allows for immediate production of content, both in the shape of text and in the shape of visual materials. And at the same time, we see how this kind of content is sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously being used in order to promote certain narratives or certain ideas, to plant them into the audience's brain, basically. And this is becoming very tricky, not to say dangerous, because the deepfake content, on the one hand, the content that is not even false, but is just something being said, is already impacting a lot the stock markets, the exchange rates, the situation, let's say the financial rates, and the behavior of the people, because sometimes this kind of content is targeted at triggering emotions, triggering certain behavior patterns, certain decisions being made. So for instance, we see some aggression coming in, or content basically promoting the idea of aggression. So that is aimed at creating fear, that is aimed at creating defensive behavior patterns and aggressive behavior patterns in return. So we could observe this kind of methodology being applied to peoples and nations globally in order to control them, in order to control their minds, their behavior, their consumer behavior, their political behavior, social behavior, and so on. And if you want to talk about recent examples of how deep this can go, not to mention simple aggression being fueled between, I don't know, Ukraine and Russia, between India and Pakistan and Israel and all of its neighbors. But if you want to have a deeper example, that probably would be the entire transgender policy that in just a couple of decades has affected people that much that they went into having their children undergo surgeries that are irreversible. So this is how deep this type of propaganda can affect our decision-making process and our ability to make short and long-term decisions. That's why it's essential to discuss this topic today, I believe, because in the ocean of information that is not, nothing like black and white, but all of it is shades of gray. It is essential to be able to navigate through it and to have a strong moral compass and a strong set of, let's say, beliefs, and to have a certain kind of a vector that would be showing the path, because otherwise it's easy to drown, or it's easy to lose the direction. The importance of this topic cannot be underrated.
Indeed, and it is a call for us all in the world to remain vigilant and critically engaged, as the narratives we consume can greatly influence everything around us. Thank you so much, Yulia, for that analysis. And of course, let's make our next stop to the United States of America by welcoming Mr. Ashil Eke, who is an international financial expert, and we want to appreciate you. Like we mentioned, this information doesn't only spread around lines of politics or culture, but we also have this information around the sphere of economics. So with you giving us a clear definition of what this information is, we want to hear from you, Mr. Eke. What some of the factors that have made this information more prevalent in our society of today, especially as international cooperation or relations is concerned?
Thank you very much, Clarice, for the invitation. I think it's been a long time since we haven't had a conversation like this, on your show. I'm glad that we are back together, especially on this channel, Pan-African Media. Listen, the question on the economic front about this topic is critical because disinformation today is recognized as a top global risk, with profound and multifaceted impacts, on the world economy. For example, the World Economic Forum, the 2025 version, focused on global risk and ranks misinformation and disinformation as the #1 risk right now, over the next 2 years, ahead of stuff, things like weather, extreme weather, geopolitical conflict, and so on. So now, when we talk about disinformation, let's look at the different aspects, how it affects different aspects of the global economy. If we look at the market volatility, recently, there's been a lot of losses, and those losses have been triggered by disinformation, which create irrational market, activities, movements, and also we have false fake news, false news, whether it's information, whether it's false news coming from companies or bad companies, or bad the economic indicators that people put forth, misleading investors, or even on geopolitical events, that we've been watching recently, the war in Ukraine and things like that. Those type of events can abruptly, create a situation on the market that could, result in a sell-off or rally, based on whether the information is positive for the market or negative for the market. So that causes a lot of volatility, right? So when we talk about also on the reputation front for companies, for corporations in general, companies targeted by disinformation spend on average about $10 billion each year on reputation management. That is significant. Because what the company has is its brand. When that brand is tarnished and by misinformation or disinformation, we have to understand that disinformation is information that's put out there for the purpose of doing bad, to the person that it's being targeted to. Whereas misinformation is an information that's put out there without any intent to harm the person or the party, but the effect is the same. It's all negative. So exactly. So when it comes to corporations, disinformation could have a very expensive effect on them. When we look at the foreign direct investments, in general, we also notice that fake news, usually that we call fake news, they can influence investor sentiment, right? So, from what research have shown, it's fundamental that in this world, in this economic and digital world today, that institutions and corporations, institutions, and the like, remain strong, because when that doesn't happen, disinformation could really undermine confidence and complicate investments decision when it comes to foreign direct investments. So another aspect is the market credibility also. There is an erosion of the market credibility because people don't trust the market anymore. People are not sure exactly if the market is behaving in an appropriate way or is being led by information that is trustworthy or not, and that is very damaging for investors because they have a sensation, they have a feeling that the market is being manipulated, and we've seen there recently Trump being part of that disinformation too. He recently, when he said to people that when the market is down, so be ready to invest, be ready to buy, something like that. I'm not quoting exactly what he said, but he went on his social through media and then posted that market is down, it's good time to buy. And then the next day, he waived the tariff situation that he put out there on the world, and the market went up to 1,000 points. 1,000 points. So that's also part of disinformation. That is really not appropriate from for president to be doing that, to manipulate the market like that. So there are different areas like that on the economy that we can touch, and then we can see that disinformation has a really impact, especially financially for companies, for institutions, for the market, and that could really undermine the trust that people put on the market today.
I don't know if we should be asking the question if probably this information should be made a norm in society today, given all the dynamics, or probably as far as the world of politics, economic, culture, even religion is concerned. And still in the same perspective, you just mentioned the United States, and that's why we are going to stay with you, Steve Gill. And this time around, you're a political commentator, and we're looking at this recent meeting between the president of the United States of America, Donald Trump, with his South African counterpart, Cyril Ramaphosa, that actually brought again us to probably think of how political discourses and other narratives are being tailored intentionally to probably change public perception about a particular country, nation, which actually affects its diplomacy. And now, aside being a political commentator, you're also a media personality. We want to look at the effects of such a move on the trust that the global world has when it comes to news that comes from the United States of America. And how do you think the media can navigate this very controversial moment of information warfare? Hi Steve, you are muted, please. Hello Steve, is everything okay now? I think we're going to continue with Paseka Farumele to get his own perception, given that South Africa was at the fore. And while we were talking in the preamble, we quite mentioned a whole some sort of examples citing the Holocaust, and of course we also cited the Rwandan Genocide, and this information was at the center of what happened in Rwanda and the Arab Spring. So in giving a topic for this, the Paseka Faramali, in what ways do you think political, economic and social factors can create an environment that is conducive to probably fight this disinformation, which has existed since the 50s and is gaining grounds today in this very complex world of today?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Clarice. I think one of the biggest problems that we have is that disinformation has real life impact. So it does not necessarily just stop with it being something that is seen to just move around maybe the economy, maybe move around the markets and etc. But it has real life impact. It does impact people's lives. And I do love the fact that you touched on something that was important, the Rwandan genocide. One of the primary things that was used before the genocide started was that the media was used a lot. So there were radio stations which are used to push narratives, to vilify people, to dehumanize people, so that you could be able to lay the grounds for you to be able to kill these people en masse. So it is very important for us to be able to combat these these disinformation sessions that we've continuously have found ourselves having to engage with, especially recently. Myself as a South African who lives in South Africa, seeing what is being portrayed of South Africa to the rest of the world, specifically by the President of the United States, I found it very necessary for us to step out and to speak to these things and to speak to them with facts, you know, because if we use the case of Rwanda, we see what was the eventual impact. And I don't want to use the words, but that was on a smaller scale. That was not even on a global scale where you are having problems between nations. Because the reason why it's difficult to say it was on a smaller scale, because people lost their lives in mass. So the same thing that happened with the United States first coup in Guatemala, where what they did was they used a lot of disinformation where they were trying to target the population, the general population, that is, about the instability that was happening in the country. And it is very difficult for you to be able to listen to the radio. You are presented with certain narratives, certain stories are being driven, you are told that soldiers are attacking at a specific spot. You start asking yourself, am I safe? You become uncomfortable with your environment, even though all of that is not happening. One of the key things that the United States used specifically in that context was the media, specifically the radio, where they were funding and using lots of money to fund these disinformation campaigns, which at the time were not called specifically that. But what they did was that they manipulated the minds of the people for them to believe, even though their eyes are telling them not to believe. So it is very important for us to be very careful when we're dealing with these matters and to be very vocal and speak to disinformation and misinformation itself, because as my panel has spoken, that disinformation and misinformation are not the same thing. Absolutely. Misinformation for me is specifically a person like Trump, because for me, I see Trump as someone who pushes misinformation because he believes it, even though I do not believe that he knows that he is lying when he is pushing that information. That's why he is able to say these things so passionately and so openly, because he genuinely believes that there is not an alternative reality which is based objectively off of facts. So that is why he does that. But disinformation for me is looking at someone like Elon Musk, who proudly steps out there and he knows that he is misinforming the population. And he knows that he has a platform, specifically Twitter, X, where he's able to push these ideas of his for his own self benefit, because he knows if he can push these narratives, he's able to manipulate what happens in different parts of the world. And because Twitter is such a big platform, all right, let me just finish that sentence. Sure. Because it is such a big platform, what happens is that you are able to manipulate so many people in such a small space of time with such little information. So for me, I'm saying that look at the two, disinformation and misinformation. Misinformation, see Trump; disinformation, see Elon Musk. I think that makes it simple. Thank you, Clarice.
Thank you so much. We're going back to Steve, if everything is okay. Steve, you're welcome. Let's now answer. Do you think what happened recently with your President Donald Trump, was it misinformation or disinformation at this juncture, given what Paseka just highlighted now? You're still muted, Steve.
We're not hearing you, Steve.
Steve, please, can you check your mic? You're still muted. I think we will leave you again and come back probably about in a few minutes while we continue to analyze the topic for discussion. We're coming back to you, Leah. I quite remember in during the 2024 presidential elections in Russia, which actually I was present alongside other journalists and even observers. Before the proclamation of the election results, we saw news already from the Washington Post and other supposed mainstream media writing instances of probably disinformation, as I can put it, because they cited that people who voted in the new regions were voted or probably voted under some sort of duress or probably gunshot, given that the state they mentioned was the state where I and my colleagues were present. Now, it shows that it is a very difficult one for the media to navigate in the process of news giving. How can we now, in this digital era, Julia, help the media to probably understand these complexities in the information warfare, and what parameters do you think this sphere can use to be able not to mislead the world in the process of news giving?
Even in more simple cases, you would always have a great space for interpretations, and you would always have quite a vast variety of versions emanating from an event that, let's say, a few people attended. So if you ask 5 different people that attended the very same event, you will hear very different impressions. So when it comes to the definition itself of the truth and of false, what you can clearly be talking about is facts. Otherwise, it's all about interpretations. Yet at the same time, this is exactly what one of the key objectives of spreading information is, especially in cases when you need to manipulate through the audience. It's triggering emotions. So the emotional ingredient that is
unfortunately we lost Julia. And just to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that you're on to your interactive program, Global Insight and Knowledge Sharing, as well on your Pan-African television. And today we are looking into greater details, the effect of disinformation in the world order or in the contemporary society. And of course, we are defining what disinformation is and what actually can the world stakeholders, government, civil society, or other organizations can do to curtail the negative effects of such a I call it a rhetorical, philosophical, ideology that has overwhelmed the world, especially in the geopolitical context. And we come back to you, Ashil Eki. Now let's look at why probably this information has been used today as a tool for geopolitical manipulation. What do you think is that thing?
During that period of time is, all those attempts to trigger emotions through showing certain kinds of images and all that. And it is really difficult to navigate through, and the only recipe I would assume here is to look at the facts and to analyze the emotions that a certain piece of content triggers, and then to see Kibana or who could be benefiting from different kinds of interpretations. But the issue of the truth itself is always very difficult to discuss, because you ask 2 people attending an event, one would say it was boring and it was nothing useful, another person would say that it was life-changing, right? So I mean, it's difficult, but facts are the only hard things to look at in this kind of cases.
And we were asking this question still to understand further with you, Steve, if you're back. What explains the fact that governments are today using this information as a tool for geopolitical manipulation? We want to take the critical example of what happened lately in the United States of America with the perpetrated videos that President Donald Trump presented as evidence of African genocide. And we want to take us back to probably 1933 with the Nazi sentiments there in Germany. And we discover that still today we still see this information as that tool of used for geopolitical manipulation. So how can we probably understand this phenomenon, and what's the way forward towards curtailing?
Well, hopefully the audio is connected at this point. I disconnected and reconnected, so that hopefully works. Let me touch first on what Julia just pointed out. You and I and others were actually observing elections in Eastern Ukraine when the reporting in Eastern Europe and the US was that people were being forced to vote at gunpoint. There were literally hundreds of election observers around the country, including us. What the West was being told were absolute lies, and you can disagree on opinions, but the fact was we were there. I didn't see CNN or the New York Times or the Washington Post, and yet when Crimea voted a decade earlier, all the major outlets were there. So part of what the media does to intentionally misinform people is what they choose to cover and not cover, in addition to them, in many cases, just lying about the circumstances that occur based on what they're told, rather than having reporters or folks that are actually there seeing and showing what the actual location looks like. I don't agree, frankly, with some of my panelist friends that what President Trump did in the Oval Office with the President of South Africa was misinformation or disinformation. You have video. Again, we can trust our eyes, not what we're told, of South African leaders calling for kill the Boers, kill the whites, and it has been happening. So I'm not sure how it's disinformation when you're actually showing what is happening, when you're having large rallies where you have leaders exhorting genocide to deny that it's happening, when, again, we can see it with our own eyes, and that's what President Trump showed. And I don't think how that can be declared as misinformation or disinformation.
And now, in probably the global aspects of it, Steve, still with you. We know that today the U.S. hegemony is gradually losing, and some pundit of the viewpoint that the way the Donald Trump is going with his policies, and probably with his connection with likes like Elon Musk and all the narratives that we see or hear coming from the USA, it's actually creating a larger scope for the end to this U.S. hegemony. And now another pundit pointed out that in the past, when news came from the White House or from anywhere across the United States, it was considered a universal truth. But with instances of disinformation which have actually occupied the media landscape in the US, given glaring examples which we just highlighted now, what do we have to say about probably US hegemony in today's world, and how probably the disinformation spree is gradually coming to an end with the new ideologies coming from other global powers entering probably the geopolitical landscape?
Well, we could have many examples of how the U.S. media is misinforming and disinforming and losing their credibility in the process. It is not limited to U.S. media. I mean, we saw early in the Ukrainian-Russia conflict where we were being told that the ghost of Kiev, a fighter pilot, had shot down 10 Russian fighter jets. It was a complete lie. It was completely made up, and yet it was repeated by Western media to act like the Ukrainians were this unstoppable military force. So again, propaganda has become an instant part of war in real time. And then again, I think some other great examples during the COVID crisis. You had the media on one side constantly claiming you have to get the vaccine, which had not been tested and was now, as we learn more deadly than people were being told. And yet all of the media outlets were proclaiming you have to get this vaccine. And there was only one side of the story told. If somebody objected or said, well, wait, there's more to say on the other side, that was completely silenced. Doctors were at risk of losing their medical licenses if they prescribed drugs like ivermectin that are widely used throughout the world, but because the pharmaceutical companies were buying big ads, Moderna and Pfizer, on those media outlets, they were telling one side of the story. We're seeing, again, the same thing with the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Yeah. You'll see reports in Gaza from U.S. media and Western media, but you don't see any US or Western media on the Russian side of the conflict. So you get one side told by Ukraine. And why is that? Because the military complex in the US profits by selling more bombs and missiles and bullets. So we only get one side of the story. So I would say a test globally is if you're only hearing one side of a story from any media in your country or anywhere else, it's probably not balanced and it's probably not true.
Okay, thank you so much. And let's go back to Yulia as actually she...
Sorry, Clarice.
Okay, Professor, I want to...
Before you continue, I need to respond because I do not think that it would be fair.
I wanted to respond too.
Okay,
yeah,
go ahead,
can I
Professor.
please just take it and then
just
you
go ahead
afterwards?
Yes, just go ahead, please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I cannot let you go on and continue to perpetuate the same misinformation that parties like AfriForum, who act as if they are protecting their own freedoms, but they want to protect their own privileges, continue to perpetuate in right-wing media. And I will not allow you to try and push this thing in this particular platform because that is very problematic. I'm sorry that factually speaking, statistically speaking, black people, poor people in this country are victims of crime more than the people that you're saying are dying, because you're saying it is happening. When we can clearly stipulate and we can factually tell you that that very video that you saw of Julius Malema, who was singing "Kill the Boer, Shoot the Farmer," there is historical context that you need to understand before you come into a platform and try to say that this person is leading. That man leads a party that is 9%. He lost so many votes, and we know that he is in the fringe. And statistically, factually, objectively so, there is zero evidence to show that that song has led to death. The only stat that we have that has been shown in record was in the TRC in 1992 in South Africa, where one person had come to a platform and said, on the TRC platform, and said, I was motivated by this song. Right now, in the very farms that you just referred to, black people who are the workers, black people who own farms, because they are disadvantaged economically and financially, are the ones who are dying, even those who are farmers themselves, not just workers. So it is imperative that we make sure that we do not come on this platform and perpetuate the same lies that we saw in the Oval Office. And another thing is that we need to be sure that we do not misconstrue what we know as fact, because Trump went on that Oval Office and he presented evidence that comes all the way from the Congo that was speaking about the violence that is currently happening in South Africa, in Africa. That had nothing to do with South Africa, because what that did was that it was manipulating people to thinking that there is this mass massacre that is happening in South Africa but has nothing to do with South Africa. So I need you to make sure that before you make a statement about this country, you are factual and you do not just believe anything that your president says, because he has consistently come on platforms and he has misrepresented himself. And that is why I argue that I believe that he believes what he's saying is true. But what he's saying is true to him, but it is not factual and cannot be proven so. So it is imperative that we clarify that before we move forward. We can take it.
Let me respond.
Yes,
and point out, if only 9% of South Africans advocate genocide, that will be a lot of deaths. And frankly, are you denying, my friend, that white farms are being taken and that white people are being killed in South Africa? Are you factually denying that that is even happening?
I am. Give me one example, one example of a farm that was taken from someone in South Africa. There is not a single land that was expropriated by the government of South Africa. I said, and this is something that is important that you need to understand, and I do believe that it was also pointed out in the United States that South Africa has a problem of crime. I have white colleagues who I work with. We were speaking about this specific subject matter today, and we all are in agreement. Even yesterday on Piers Morgan's show, even the people who've been perpetuating this narrative came out and said, Ian Root, who has proudly been saying this, when he was challenged with facts that were validated. He himself said there is no white genocide in South Africa. The problem that we have is that people are attacked in farms the same way that black people are attacked in the townships of this country, and worse, in the very farms that they're employed in. And I need you to understand something that is very important. Before I move on, Clarice, and I'm sorry that
it's okay. Just run on before. Yeah.
I just need to specify. There's a video of crosses that was taken where Trump was saying these are graves, and if you read the facts, the child of the person who that memorial was for specifically said the problem that is happening is that is a memorial for all the people who died in farms, including black people, because the case of farm matters is a specific case of crimes of taking advantage because of isolation. And the black people who are killed in those farms, they are not accounted for by their race. And now it's as if when those statistics come, it is specifically white people who've been targeted, and these black people become humanless. They do not exist as humans. So I will repeat, I can ask you now to provide a factual evidence of South African government taking farms from people and South African government telling people to go kill people. Julius Malema's stance on Kill the Boer is something that I myself have been calling out for a long time. But I can tell you there is zero evidence that that man has led to anyone being killed in a farm. Our problem is crime, and our problem is not against our fellow white South Africans.
Okay,
so I need to be very clear with it.
Okay,
thank you, Clarice.
Thank you, Pasika. I think this is an assignment for the entire team of Globals and Global Insight alongside the Pan-African media to actually be on ground again after this new perspective to ascertain the reality so as to educate our audience out there. Like we noted, it is a knowledge sharing, and we aim to constructively analyze ideologies that will bring a clear trajectory to globalization and how countries relate among each other. Now, Ms. Eke, probably you wanted to comment to what Steve said, but then I will bring us back to this question that has actually led us to probably the differences in the point opinions viewed aired by Steve and Pasika. Let's try to analyze this aspect. We are in a world where we have new alignment, new alliances, or even shifting alliances, and a world where we are moving from a unipolar to a multipolar society, and where propaganda has taken central stage, distorting even diplomacy in its real self for some sort of an agenda or a conspiracy agenda to be attained. So now, how can you use this aspect of new alignment, shifting probably alliances and other aspects that come into play as far as collaboration among countries are concerned, to understand the present state of affairs regarding the situation in South Africa and the recent, particularly pertaining the white Afrikaners, and the recent probably evidence we saw in the Oval Office presented by President Donald Trump. Let's try to understand the diplomacy of this all, and probably get to a compromising situation for better clarification.
Oh, I thank you, Clarice. I am in shock. What Steve just did is typical propaganda. We talk about propaganda. Propaganda is a systematic and deliberate dissemination of information, ideas, or rumors that are often biased or misleading in nature, with the purpose of influencing public opinion, shaping attitudes, and guiding behavior towards a specific agenda. Now, I don't know what's Steve's agenda today, but if you are invited on a Pan-African channel like this one, and you state facts, you make a statement as what you just did without any proof. And I'm glad our colleague here, our panelist in South Africa, was able to give us, you know, the proper perspective, because we are all in different locations. We are not necessarily aware of the real situation down there. But for someone to use this opportunity on this channel that reaches Africans across the world and to state or to imply that genocide is being happening for white people in South Africa, I am just shocked. And so I don't want to say too much about it because I can go off very easily on him right now. But I'm going to keep my composure and, you know, hope that it was just a misunderstanding. And it's for him to clarify that, because, you know, we don't know, not accessible still today, you know, from the majority, the super majority of the population, which is black. It's unacceptable. So the people that Malema are on the far left side that believe that everything should be stripped away from white people because they got those lands without buying, without paying for those. So they took them freely because of the power of the weapon that they had to colonize, you know, those people, dominate those people and subjugate those people. So, you know, where do we stand today? Where is the middle ground that we need to adopt? You know, people who stole your land and use that to make money, to dominate, to subjugate the owners, the rightful owners. What are they supposed to do today? If Steve was in charge of South Africa, how would he solve that land problem, given the facts that we have today, given the situation? I want to hear from him about his solution about that. Okay. It's easy to sit here and say things to disinform, to misinform. I don't know if he's doing it on purpose or not, but he has the opportunity to clarify that. And please give him the chance to explain himself on this, because this is unacceptable on this channel. Thank you.
Absolutely, Mr. Eki. We are going to come back subsequently to Steve to get some probably clarification as to why he made the assertion. Just to note, the purpose of the program is to ensure that we have a common ground, especially on global ideologies, and see how we can foster positively international relations and cooperation among nations of the world. And with all that has been said, we want to make a stop with you, Yulia. What do you think at this particular juncture, still at this very particular point, because I would love us to clarify it to better situate our audience out there, the place of the new dynamics in the world of diplomacy, geopolitics, and non-alignment, probably in and the place of propaganda and conspiracy agenda in curtailing these disinformation agendas. Let's come back to Steve actually to comment on this.
Well, first of all, if you have black machete-armed thugs killing a black farmer and taking his land, or killing a white farmer and taking his land, I find either case reprehensible. I don't think what you see in South Africa are large efforts of the government taking land. I do think that there are many that are following the advocacy of Malema to kill the Boers, take the land, shoot the Boers. And even the Supreme Court in South Africa has acknowledged that while those words and that language sound insightful, that it's not intentional to encourage anybody to do it. And yet words matter. And in the U.S., that would be considered hate speech. And I think when you're calling on people to be killed because of their race, whether it would be happening in the U.S. In the 50s, saying kill black people, or whether it's happening in South Africa, where a major political party leader, and I'll acknowledge that maybe he only represents 9% with his political party, but that's a pretty hefty number. And I don't think you can ignore the impact of words encouraging people to do this, when again there are not good records of how many are being killed, how much land is being taken forcefully, not necessarily by the government, but by the folks that are killing people and taking their land, white and black, in South Africa.
Do you have any example to back up your statement about land being taken? Do you have any case? Do you have any example?
I did not bring it with me today, but I will be happy to send it to you, Akele. And I would hope that the government of South Africa will do that. You know, and I'm not comparing the deaths and taking of property in South Africa to the Nazis, but the Germans weren't issuing press releases when they killed 6 million Jews. Governments don't acknowledge what they do until it's discovered long after.
Steve, Mr. AK, please, I'll come back to you, please. Okay. Steve, I'm still with you. When I want us to go back to what happened in the Oval Office when President Donald Trump presented the evidence that probably to his counterpart Cyril Ramaphosa, and probably we got, of course, the response from President Ramaphosa noting that there is no such case in his country, as he is very much aware of the developments pertaining, especially the land expropriation bill, and of course he pointed out that the slogan coming from the leader of the economic freedom fighters, Julius Malema, is just something like which he saw it as a political distraction, and still categorically noting that there are no cases of white African genocide in the country. And it is also at a critical moment because we have a coalition government in South Africa between the African National Congress and the Democratic Alliance, which is actually headed by the white, and we're talking about the Minister of Agriculture. And he said, if actually there was such a phenomenon of genocide against the white in the country, I wouldn't have been here with these ministers who represent the white minority in this probably in South Africa. And now with this assertion from you, do you have more evidence that could bring us into the understanding of a clear probably practice of such in South Africa? The goal is not probably to defend one side or the other in a global inside. The goal actually is for us to concert, understand ideologies, and see where we can have a common ground that will provide a better atmosphere for diplomatic relations among countries of the world.
Well, Akele asked a great question. What would I do if I was handling the land distribution in South Africa? Not a job I want, but I would encourage that the president of South Africa should be the one producing the proof and having an international investigation. So it's not just the political leadership in South Africa saying, no, 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 it's not happening. The same president that denied knowing anything about this protest song when he has been pictured with Malema before. He knows the guy. He knows these songs are being sung at these large rallies, and he denied that. So if I was him, I would be putting together a dependable international team to come in and do an investigation, and let's put the proof out. And I don't think it's genocide on the level that it's happening at the massive numbers that, again, you saw in Nazi Germany with Jews. But if it is a problem of land being taken, again, whether it's from black farmers or from white farmers, by those who are practicing the fact that I'm bigger, I'm badder, and I've got a crowd with me, that is wrong, and it should be exposed and dealt with. And the other thing that I would point out is that the president brought a couple of white golfers to that meeting in the Oval Office, supposedly to testify that it wasn't happening, and yet when asked, they acknowledged that their father was a golfer, was a farmer, and that their friends who were farmers were experiencing this. So are we going to believe what the government says when we know we should be skeptical, or the very people that the president brought to the Oval Office with him, who were white, who had farmers who were related to them, acknowledging that it was happening?
Paseka, now you just listen to what Steve said pertaining this glaring example and the most recent that we have. Now, with all of this analysis, can we categorically say that what happened there in the Oval Office in front of the public was an intentional act? Because we were looking at probably Trump going to hold his media officers or public relations officers into account for providing such evidence that was unfounded pertaining the situation in South Africa. And when we listen to the analysis of Steve, one will be tempted to ask this question: if it was an intentional act with those evidences we saw at the Oval Office, and what was the aim, or probably what is hidden behind such
questions about the account.
As I said with my first comment, that I don't think it was. I don't think it was intentional. I don't think it was disinformation. I think Trump genuinely believes that white people are being targeted in South Africa. And for someone who does not listen, no matter what facts you provide, it is common for them to want to believe what they already believe in. So I think that he genuinely believed that everything that he provided meant that it is factual. It is somewhat disappointing that we are on this platform and we have to teach people that I respect you, Steve. We did meet a while back. It is somewhat disappointing because it makes me question how do you conduct research as someone that is responsible for sharing knowledge with the masses, because you pointed out that the only source of information on Pharmatex comes from the South African Police Services, what we call SAPS. But international bodies such as the UN, Genocide Watch, have been following this matter. This is not something new. I've been within this discourse for many years. I've seen how it has transformed, where it started. I saw Trump speaking about this in 2018. I have been heavily involved, and I know international bodies that had taken the decision to say, okay, this has been going on. This is the information that is in circulation. Let us investigate. And they found that there was no factual information that said that there was any reality of a genocide in South Africa. Now, when you say South Africans, we cannot rely on South Africa comparing the South African government to what the Germans did to the Jews. That is so funny, because the same South African government is the one that is taking Israel to go and account for its war crimes currently happening, but somehow they are the Jews. But the main thing that I want to point out specifically here is that the very South African government and the SAPS said to bodies like AfriForum, okay, provide these facts that you are saying that we are misrepresenting. Provide this information that you are saying that we are misrepresenting. Give us these names, these people that we might not have recognized, and put in the statistics. Do you know how many cases came out that were misrepresented, or people whose names were left out of the South African report? 1. Do you know the skin color of that person? Black. So, if anything, I hope that you take away from this that as a man who I believe is respectable, before making an opinion based off a person that you love, because I can clearly see you love your president, and that is okay, please do further research and make sure that you do not become an example of what misinformation and disinformation leads to. Because in terms of facts, statistics, and in terms of just general knowledge, when speaking to a specific subject matter, it is essential to make sure that all corners are covered. If we were to take everything that you've just presented, and we're going to compare it to the facts, providing the evidence for it, it would be so sad to see that we are sharing a platform with people who do not bother to make an effort to actually investigate matters that they give opinions on, specifically people who have to deal with the media. And it is a bit saddening, but I think that before we start throwing around information and throwing around our weight, it is essential for us to make sure that we know what we speak to or what we speak about. So moving forward from there, Clarice, the president, the Oval Office. I think that was Ramaphosa knew what was going to happen, and to provide clarity, Ramaphosa knew that knows the song. He never said that he does not know the song. He never removed himself from Julius Malema. The people who did remove themselves were the member of parliament who is a part of the GNU, John Steenhuisen, and I do understand why. There is political tension between the two parties. And the richest man in the country, sorry, I forgot his name, but the richest South African in the country. What he said himself was Julius Malema has been coming for him for many years now, and he understands. And he provided context about South Africa's reality. How you decide to ignore all of that, all the facts that are provided there, that South Africa's problem is a problem of crime, no one hunts down white people, and decide that you are going to take what those two golfers, even though any else tried to balance his opinion, you take the opinion of those two men and leave out everyone else's opinion, then it's out of my hands, because you don't care about facts, you don't care about reality, you don't care about statistics, you don't care about any of that. Your only concern and what matters to you is what you agree on with your president. So that is just the reality. And I think that is the same pattern of behavior that we see with the president of the United States. It doesn't matter what factual information you give him that is backed by objective evidence. He takes a position and you cannot remove him from it, because somehow he miraculously is able to know what is true without any evidence, and the facts that you provide cannot be true because that is fake news. I hope that today we came here and we learned a lesson in misinformation and disinformation, because it is going to be odd to watch this this engagement later on. Thank you, Clarice.
Of course, the goal is for us actually to learn. Mr. Eki?
Let me just respond real quickly, Clarice.
Okay.
I think we have some agreement. I don't trust what the white South Africaners are saying when it comes to the amount of genocide they claim. I don't trust the government denying that it is happening. You have a country that is a vast majority of African Americans. The vast victims of crime will be African American, well, not African Americans, but they will be black. In the U.S., the vast majority of African Americans who are the victims of crime are victims of crime, despite their relatively low percentage in the U.S., at the hands of other African Americans in their communities. So again, if I was going to try to help get to the bottom of this, I don't want to trust what the South Afrikaners political party is saying or what the government is saying, because governments are always going to try to cover their dirty laundry anywhere in the world. That's why I think it would be nice to get to the bottom of it. And if it's not happening, then let's make it clear to the world that this independent group has looked at it from an independent standpoint and can show this did not happen, this is not happening, and that the crime problem in Africa is more a problem of crime, not a problem of genocide. I would though point out that when you look at President Trump, the packet that he presented to the president had some, like I think Pascal pointed out, some stuff from the Congo that shouldn't have been in that packet. That's bad staff work. When President Trump was pointing to the crosses and the quote graves, they were representative of deaths, and if those are not actual representations, then the Associated Press vastly misreported that. And then finally, I would just say that I think again, Pascal and I would agree that you want to get to the truth. And that when you've got sides that are putting their thumbs on that scale, it's hard to get there.
It's actually bringing us to a bone of contention. Is it crime or genocide, or is it disinformation or misinformation? And how do we actually bring about proximity to these terms to understand this? I think you will answer this question, Mr. Eki. Let's look at can we today, given the status quo of the world, especially when it comes to new perspectives of conquest and probably gaining a competitive edge in international affairs, politics, the economy, can we boast of an independent body that can bring authentic information pertaining the probably ideologies, questionable ideologies in the world, especially genocide, in the present global status quo that we see? Propaganda and disinformation has probably have taken central stage. How can we navigate this very complex situation to bring a balance in whatever thing is happening across nations of the world, be it in South Africa or in Israel, in eastern Ukraine, and probably across the African continent and the global world at large?
Well, I think the best way to be able to talk about these issues is really through the eyes of the parties themselves, and also the witness, the facts that are gathered on the ground. Let the facts speak for themselves instead of people giving their opinions without any facts, and making comparisons to Nazi, to what happened in Nazi, that the Nazi did to the Jews and all that stuff. I don't think we're having an interesting debate right now because of that misrepresentation, disinformation that Steve propagated. He's still doing it. He's not even aware of the impact that could have. I think our gentleman in South Africa gave us a lot of information. I think it's good to take that information and go and do additional research. Now, there are white people that are part of the South African government in the coalition, I understand.
Absolutely.
And so what have they said with regard to those allegations of genocide? The word genocide is just too big of a word. Too big of a word to be used in a way that is so careless. It's what is going on in South Africa that warrants the word genocide. We've seen genocide in Rwanda. We've seen what's happening in Gaza. We've seen so many genocides in the world. What is happening now in South Africa? Who has died there? Where are the videos? We are in the world, a new world where people have, smartphones. They can pick up, they can film anything, anytime, and put it out there. Where is the evidence to be even thinking about genocide? Genocide, that word in this conversation about South Africa shouldn't be there. It's an anomaly. It's unacceptable.
And Clarice, I will agree with Achille on that. I think genocide.
Listen, let me talk. I don't need you to intervene, Steve.
Mr. Achille, please.
I don't need you to intervene.
Please, let's.
I was agreeing with you. Okay,
I don't.
You don't even
agree.
want agreement. You don't even want agreement.
Listen, it's not about agreement. You are not responsible. You are not taking responsibility for what you just did, and that is disappointing. You have to take responsibility for that disinformation that you propagating. You keep propagating.
That video was not disinformation, Achille.
Gentlemen, I just wish to call to attention that this platform, we seek to share knowledge, share ideas, and bring about a conclusion that will help in prospering global peace and stability. And we're here today to discuss this disinformation and how we, as people who are conscious of how the world functions, can now bring about practical solutions to mitigate the
Right.
probably negative effects of this information. It is difficult to completely eradicate given the present global status quo. So as expert of as people who understand the agenda of the global world, how can we now help people to shape their own perceptions constructively, not to be entrapped in whatever may be geopolitical contestation or maybe economic or even social contestation among people with defined personal agendas? Mr. Ike, I'm still with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the solution is to be very cautious about what we say, to, you know, look at the facts, and understand, you know, perspective, understand the environment, understand, you know, the you know, what surround every event. You can show me a video of somebody say something, but the context matters. The context has to be taken into consideration. Otherwise, everything that we see, we can just blow it out of proportion to make our case. No. You know, you've been shown a video of people making allegations, saying things. Okay, it's probably a rally. Probably people are excited. Probably people are frustrated. They can say whatever they want. But on the ground, you know, what is happening on the ground is what matters. And when there's nothing that's happening for real on the ground, we just dismiss that. You know, it's just talk. People talk. People say things. People vent. It's about venting your frustration. You know, there is a huge population in South Africa that doesn't have a job, especially in the black community. They're looking for work, and those kind of situations can make people say things because they're frustrated. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's what they really think deep down there. You know, how many times have you thought about, you know, harming somebody because that person made you mad? You know, but you know, and then you cool down and you say, okay, you know, I'm sorry, you know, I said more than what I was supposed to say. I didn't mean it. And then you apologize and you move on. That's what it is. It's nothing, unless there's action that, you know, actions that shows with evidence that supports that viewpoint. We can't just assume that because of the video about people saying things, then it is reality. No. That kind of that kind of analysis is just plain wrong, and then it's appalling coming from somebody who has that level of experience that you have, Steve. So anyway, that's what I'm about.
It is indeed a complex situation now, Mr. Ike, and like we said, we're going to chat ways forward. Let me come to you, Paseka. When I listened to the analysis actually brought forth by you, Steve, and Mr. Ike, we want to come to understanding this. We are in a state where many countries in Africa today are calling for reparations, and I think the African Union has actually defined this year to be a year of reparations. They feel like they have to be maybe those who perpetrated heinous acts in the continent, they have to pay for it. And now I want us to relate this now to probably how the African continent, or political probably pundits and even politicians across the continent, can strategically call for these reparations without using utterances that the world, some major stakeholders can use against them. We're taking the case of Julius Malema, and like Yulia highlighted when she was talking, that the prime or the optimal goal of disinformation is to trigger emotions, and most likely emotions which are very, you know, violent. Like you always see, you said earlier on that when you're angry you can grow out of proportion. Now, knowing fully that this is, if we want to accept that that is how disinformation works, information meant to trigger very fierce reaction, emotional reactions that will give a larger scope for the other party to attain this probably a defined or set agenda. How can we now curtail? The question is, how can we now help probably African politicians to be more probably strategic in calling for these reparations, or probably calling for justice, given what happened across the continent many years ago, so that we do not give the parties that still have stakes across the continent room to capitalize on some of the discourses that will come from these renowned politicians, probably for their own good.
Thank you, Clarice. In terms of reparations in Africa, actually I will come back to that as a second point. The most important point that I need to just put out there is the matter of statistics. I'm going to come to reparations because they're very important, but I think I need to now put my lecturer code on and my scholarly code on. Statistics do not work like that, brother Steve. Why? You said there's a higher number of black people in South Africa, so it obviously means that more black people are going to die than white people, so the numbers are bound to be higher. We use statistics when we analyze deaths, especially violent deaths. We use statistics to assess what's the percentage of the population that comes from a specific race that passes away from violent crimes. So I just wanted to put it out there that statistics do not work like that. And going back to the case of America that you pointed out, that the majority of people who would die who are black or black American are black people. There is historical context to that. I am not here to address that because I'm not black American. I'm a South African, so I will not speak to that. So I will move on. I don't think it is necessary for us to be stuck on reparation on statistics. So reparations, the matter of reparations, I don't think that there will be reparations for Africa. It will be amazing if that was to happen, but if it was to happen, it was going to have happened ages ago. Why I say that is because the West does not recognize Africans as humans, and we've seen it consistently in the way that they engage with our leaders, in the way that they engage with us as a continent, and how even today France consistently fight to hold its access to the minerals that are in the Sahel, even though countries in the Sahel have indicated that we cannot allow you to continue taking advantage of us and destabilizing this region. So if a country is not willing to even leave and continues to benefit from the continent of Africa, clearly it has no intentions of reparation. They would never do that. The English today, the most basic of things, and saying, but you do continue to hold our minerals. The king's or the queen's crown has the biggest diamond that was found in Cullinan, and until this day we've been saying, but you need to return these things, and they have become so dismissive and saying, but why would we do that? I can give you a case of art. Today the Benin bronzes can be found all over Europe, and the people of Nigeria and other parts of West Africa have been claiming these assets and saying, but these are ours. But because they do not see them as human or adults, they see them as children. They say, but how are you going to take care of them? How are you going to use these resources? Because we have a better way to use. So because of that reality, and this is factual, because of that, I do not see us being at a point of reparations. I do not think that our leaders get taken serious enough for them to be able to claim reparations. I do not see. That is just the reality. And I do not think that we have put ourselves and we have placed ourselves in a position of power enough, whether economically, through the military, or through just being united as a continent, for us to be able to go to the rest of the world and claim what has been taken from us. And I need us to be perfectly, I need us to be together here. I need us to be clear on this. The extraction of African wealth did not stop just because countries got some kind of independence. Until this day, the West continues to benefit from Africa. And our biggest problem is that we have inept leadership that has no idea how to unite and be able to present itself to the rest of the world from a position of power. So once we have leadership that is able to position itself in the right place, then and only then do I think that would start being able to engage of matters of reparations. And I look at China, I do understand that they had a lot of problems similar to us. They have a historical problems, but they were able to move forward, you know. And I do understand it took a lot. A lot of people had to die. A lot of people had to sacrifice themselves for them to be able to be placed in the position, or to put themselves in the position that they are. And I do believe that we have the potential, but we have inept leadership to find ourselves competing on the global stage. So we need to sort ourselves out first, and then we can deal with the West from there. Thank you, Clarice.
Thank you so much. In the same perspective with you, Ashioki, I want us to probably educate the African politicians, because if we're looking at it from the African perspective, understanding the global narratives and how the world functions, it gives Africa already an added advantage. And we can see the revolution that is blowing across the continent, championed by the countries like Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, and a whole lot of countries actually aligning, given that there is already that reawakening, and the effect of disinformation actually already being solved across the African continent. But then we still have a particular and a very major stakeholder across Africa that will help to probably set the right trajectory for Africa to maintain that it's a real present situation position in the global affair. So now, Mr. Iki, how can we probably redefine African politics and probably take it away from something of like a rhetorical, philosophical tendency that will instead probably put the continent in a pit, or entrapped in its own agenda, rather than maybe work towards attaining the goals that will align with the AU's Agenda 2030, 2063, and getting the particularly the Africa we want?
I think the issue of reparation that you mentioned earlier, I think it's a very important topic. It's a very important point, because from the African perspective, right? So reparations are of profound importance as both a moral imperative and a practical necessity, you know, for in terms of justice, in terms of healing, and then eventually sustained development. You know, there have been many calls for reparation, you know, that address the enduring legacies of slavery and colonialism and systemic, you know, exploitation, you know, that have really been at the center of the underdeveloped continent of Africa that we have today, and that's been that is persistent today, you know, in terms of inequality and socioeconomic you know, differences, and cultural and psychological you know, harm to the African people, as well as the diaspora. So I would say it's important that this issue of reparation be discussed very deeply, because of the fact that it would be a way of restoring dignity and justice for Africans. You know, as we know, we've been subjected to so many degrading, inhumane, you know, situations for the past 700, even more years, by, you know, people who came to our lands and you know, found our customs, our culture, and our organizations, and then decided to disrupt all that for their own personal, for their own interest. And so it would be important for us to you know, have that subject discussed, because it will provide that dignity for Africans. It will be also a catalyst for economic empowerment and certainly sovereignty, right? So because the reparation will allow many countries, many people, or the continent as a whole, to be compensated, whatever way it could be, whether it's financially, whether it's morally, whether it's culturally, whatever the means are, so that people can feel that yes, justice have been served for what they've been subjected to for centuries. And so that is an important element. We should not disregard that. And it also will allow we help rectifying inequalities that we see today. Whether it's African Americans in the U.S., Africans in Africa or in the Caribbean, there is almost systematic inequalities when it comes to a black person, wherever they are, whether they are in their lands, like in South Africa, or outside the lands, like in the United States or in the Caribbean. You always see this domination, this subjugation of black people by the white powerful. And that is something that we need to really put down the table and discuss in a way that will provide meaningful impact on the black population in the world. So these are the few points that I can mention about reparation that are very important that we need to consider.
Absolutely, coming to a compromise will help us not only to bring meaningful impact on the black population, but to mankind, and that is the goal. How can we, with our diversity, function for the betterment of the world and have a well-constructive global or world order that is beneficial to everyone? Let me come back to you, Steve. We have just about 10 more minutes to be together, so we'll have to take these minutes to bring about some recommendations and what stakeholders can do to mitigate disinformation. And we are looking at, I want to use again an example like the United States of America. People have been commenting since and very pundit, especially across Africa. And another person highlighted something I want to say, not using his words, that in the days when news, came from the White House or from the US, they will believe without doubt. And this cited the case when Barack Obama, then president, announced that it was an event. I can actually probably recall everything. But then he made mention that today, especially with what is happening, given that we know the right stakes in quote of what is happening in South Africa, and then Trump showing these unfounded evidence, and thanks to the investigative team coming again to prove that those videos didn't pertain to a genocide scenario in South Africa, it actually brought the credibility of the US that has actually had the crown of a superpower in every dimension to the fore or hanging in the balance. And now with this information, Steve, what do you think can be done, particularly at this juncture, to maybe mitigate all of these negative effects for the betterment of diplomacy, global cooperation, and international relations in contemporary society that people have become more and more conscious?
Well, I think Don Rumsfeld, the former Secretary of Defense, may have said it best when talking about policy. There are things that we know, there are things we don't know, and there are things that we know that are just wrong. And I think the media is not doing an effective job consistently around the world when they are promoting an agenda, as I mentioned, whether it's with COVID, whether it's what's happening in the elections that took place in eastern Ukraine, whether it's the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, whether it's what's going on in Gaza with Israel and the Middle East. When they pick a side and they only report one side rather than letting both sides be heard or really fighting to get the facts and the truth, then they do a disservice, because democracies work when you have an involved and informed public. And if people don't trust what they're told, they're not going to be involved. If they're being misinformed, they're going to be involved in the wrong way and take the wrong direction. So I think that, again, you know, you're going to have to go a long way, I think, for the media in the U.S., certainly in the West, to restore their credibility. And at the risk of causing Pascal to change his mind, I'm going to agree with him when it comes to what he was talking about, the colonial powers that have taken the resources of Africa long after their colonial political oversight in Africa stopped. Africa's resources have not been used for the benefit of Africans for too long, for centuries, perhaps, as Akile pointed out. And I think the first step towards Africa being what Africa can and should be is not just to having politicians who develop that ability to lead in the right way, as again Pascal was mentioning, but to have those resources devoted to benefiting Africans, because most of them are still being taken and benefiting those somewhere else. The second part of that is corruption. It's a problem that's not limited to Africa. It is limited to politicians, and whether it's in Africa, whether it's in the U.S., whether it's all over the world, politicians who are corrupt deprive their people of getting the benefit of the resources, whether they're black leaders in a black country, white leaders in a white country. When it's going into the pockets of politicians and not benefiting those who are the actual residents and citizens of that country, that also deprives people of what they're entitled to. And I think a focus on how Africa, perhaps with some not reparations, but certainly some better leadership and cooperation, to make sure that resources are being used for Africans rather than being diverted to everywhere else, which is what's been happening for centuries.
And we're going to be concluding. Let's start off with you with the conclusion, Paseka Faramali. This is disinformation we're talking about that often leads to misinformation, fake news. But there is a way that we can change narratives if we continue to hold constructive discourse across the globe that will actually check all of these ideologies that seem to favor just the few, those wanting to keep the fame and power. So in your own opinion, what do you think are those practical parameters that can be adopted, be it by government, individuals, civil society, or the stakeholders, to probably reduce the level, especially the negative effects of such the circulation of intentional false news?
Thank you, Clarice. There's several things that could be done. I remember that, I think that's one of the points that we spoke to, that in the age of social media, where videos can be adjusted or videos can be created, the better AI becomes, the more misinformation can be shared, or disinformation, actually intentionally so, can be shared. In this age, it has become very difficult, and I think that it is outside the hands of government. But now it has become in the hands of us who are activists in our own spaces. For us to be able to, for myself as a university professor, it is essential for me to be able to teach my students how to identify signs of disinformation. And I do understand that because this is a very complex subject, depending on where you stand on the political spectrum, it is easy to identify any information as misinformation or disinformation. But I think once you teach fact-based, objective, I know it's very difficult to find objectivity, especially in this current age. it's essential for us to make sure that we teach content that is verified, and content that is not necessarily political, but content that is correct, that is based off information that can be that we know where it comes from. So I think that is the solution from an academical point of view. And I also do understand that you look at what happened. Facebook had tried to implement something that was similar to Twitter, and now called X, where you have these I forgot what they call them, notes something, where if you say something that is clearly disinformation, then it can rectify what you said. So if those platforms, being the biggest carriers or delivers of misinformation and disinformation, I have stopped doing that, then I don't think that we'll find a solution there. It then has to be an individual based solution. Thank you very much, Clarice.
Thank you so much, Paseka Faramali. Mr. Eki, how can we ensure that new alliances do not create a fertile ground for more disinformation that would distort the new world order that the world is actually looking forward to us having?
Yes, so when I look at BRICS, new alliances, we talk about new alliances, we talk about BRICS, we talk about the Global South, and how we should be able to work together in a seamless way and in a trustworthy way. We need to really first make sure that the information that we put out there, whether it's corporate data, whether it's government data, whether it's social, or anything, has to be vetted properly, accurate, to make sure that people are not misinformed or disinformed, because there's with artificial intelligence today, we didn't talk about AI. AI it's a very important tool today that could also lead to disinformation depending on how we use it, right? Yes. So now AI itself is not even perfect yet. When you use AI, you got to be very cautious. You have to be cautious about using it because it could bring out some information that's not accurate, or that is being propagated from by all kind of disinformation channels. AI just collects information. That's what they do, and then they put it out, whatever. Yeah. So you have to be very careful in vetting that, making sure that we don't just accept that information as is. So yes, so definitely AI is there. We have to be very careful about it. And so when it comes to data, that's as we know, data is gold today. Everybody needs data. Every company, every country. It allows us to be able to do so many analysis, so many projections, and then project in the future about what could happen in the world. Whether it's in the economic sphere, whether it's the political sphere, or in the social sphere. So we have to be able to have appropriate information, vetted information, and that allows everybody to be able to trust what we are sharing. Okay. So that is going to be the challenge for the world, and it's not something that could be done easily, because there are different interests, there are different parties. Sure. that have different interests, right? So whether you are in a government, you want some information that will go in your favor. Whether if you are in opposition, you want information that goes in your favor. When you are a lobbyist for a group for an industry, you want information in your favor, and things like that. So everybody wants information that would help support their viewpoints, their interests. So that's where the challenge becomes. So when it's raining, it's one drop of water coming from the sky could be interpreted by different parties as whatever,
Absolutely, and that's where we have the problematic. Of course, exactly. Will there come a time, Steve, that the interests of everybody or every party or nations in the world will be one, that we can end this information? So how can we do this? Because we know that this information surely kills the credibility of international organizations and even of individuals or governments. So do you see a world where one day the interest of all the parties will be one for us to live the reality of a more conducive global village?
I don't think we'll get to a point where everybody will agree with everything. We've probably shown that today. But again, I think if you hang out with people like us, smart people, you talk, you ought to be able to find ways to at least understand what you know, you don't know, and beware in particular of those, as Achille was just talking about, that have an agenda and they're putting information or misinformation or disinformation out because they're pushing an agenda. But we also have the danger of with social media, people are putting out stuff because they want to get clicks, they want to get eyeballs, they want to be outrageous for the sake of being outrageous. And that's, I think, also another danger that keeps people separated and incapable of reaching kind of a common ground.
And of course, we're looking forward to probably reaching that, unrealistic reality, let me put it that way, where the common good of the world will be more than our individual wants or quest. As far as, fame and power is concerned, we will continue on this platform to help to educate through our topics for discussion, through the guests we invite to bring a new perspective to the horizon of politics, economy, culture, religion, sports, in order to bring about consciousness on how the world functions, so as to work gradually mitigating these negative effects of it. I want to thank you so much, gentlemen, for the great insight. Sometimes it is necessary to disagree for us to at the end come to a compromise. Thank you for your in-depth analysis pertaining our topic for discussion, without forgetting Julia Berg, who actually upon the discussions saying the prime focus of this information is to ignite emotions and or trigger, so we are conversant of that, and actually we can know how to react to such instances which we feel that they are just here to cause us to react. I think we can be concluding by applauding Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, for not reacting violently or maybe to fears regarding the video that was presented pertaining his country and genocide. Thank you so much to the technical crew of Pan-African Media for ensuring that this program was worthwhile, and we'll continue to thank you, dear televiewers, for trusting the Pan-African Media along with Globals as we continue to bring forth narratives that aim to satisfy the common good of mankind. Let us live in a stable world sometime. Bye-bye, and do have a lovely moment in the company of our transmissions. Bye-bye.